She took everything, my savings, my home, even my dignity. But she forgot one thing. I don't break. I rebuild. My name is Eric. I'm 42 years old and I work as a financial consultant in New York. I'm quiet, reserved, and I don't chase conflict. I value honesty, loyalty, and family above all else. When people lie to me, I don't argue. I stay silent. I stay still. But I remember everything. I don't fight back right away. I plan. Life felt steady back then, quiet, predictable, almost comforting. I woke each morning before sunrise, brewed my coffee, and slipped into the same pressed shirts I had worn for years. My days were long, filled with financial reports, endless meetings, and the routine hum of New York's heartbeat. But every evening, no matter how exhausting the day had been, I walked home with a sense of contentment. Because for me, home wasn't just four walls, it was her. Our house wasn't extravagant. It was modest, tucked away in a quiet neighborhood with creaking floors and a small backyard where the grass grew uneven. But I loved it. I loved the smell of her cooking drifting down the hallway. I loved the sound of her voice calling me from the living room. And most of all, I loved the illusion that those walls were built on trust. Looking back now, I realized that it wasn't the house that made me feel safe. It was the belief that someone inside cared enough to protect it with me. For over a decade, we shared what I thought was loyalty. She was my wife, my confidant, my partner. We celebrated anniversaries not with diamonds or expensive trips, but with handwritten notes, home-cooked meals, and quiet evenings by candlelight. I thought love was measured in presence, not possessions. And in her presence, I felt complete. There were small rituals that defined us. Saturday mornings, we walked together through the park, her hand looped through mine. In the evenings, we would sit side by side, reading in silence, occasionally pausing to share a thought or a smile. She would hum absent-mindedly while folding laundry, and I would glance at her and think, this is all I need. No grand gestures, no drama, just the calm, steady flame of companionship. I thought she shared that belief. I thought she valued the quiet consistency of our life. She used to laugh when I tried cooking, shaking her head as I burned the simplest of meals. Hopeless, she'd say, but her voice was warm, teasing, affectionate. I can still hear that laughter. It felt like proof that what we had was strong enough to last, but I was blind. Too trusting. Too comfortable. There were small shadows even then, hints of a truth I refused to see. Moments when she seemed distracted, her eyes distant during dinner. Times when I'd ask a question and she'd give me a vague, absent-minded answer. I convinced myself it was stress, fatigue, or just a passing mood. I never pressed, never questioned, because in my mind, love didn't require suspicion. It required faith. I worked long hours thinking I was securing our future. I thought every dollar I earned was an investment in us, our comfort, our stability, our shared dreams. I imagined one day we'd expand the house, maybe start traveling, maybe even retire early. She rarely spoke of the future, but I assumed it was because she trusted me to build it. That assumption would prove costly. The truth is, she was already envisioning a life that didn't include me. While I was drafting financial plans for strangers, she was drafting her own escape plan. While I was exhausted but faithful, she was restless and searching. And while I poured myself into protecting what we had, she was quietly dismantling it from the inside. If you'd asked me back then whether betrayal was possible, I would have laughed. I would have told you that our foundation was too strong, that she was too loyal, too devoted. I would have sworn that what we had was unshakable. That's how deep my blindness ran. Ignorance, I've learned, can feel like peace until the truth rips it away. I didn't see the cracks forming. I didn't notice the cold distance creeping into her voice. I told myself everything was fine. But peace built on lies isn't peace at all. It's the silence before the storm, and the storm was already gathering. I just hadn't heard the thunder yet. It began with small things, the kinds of details most people would ignore, but ones that quietly chip away at certainty. At first, it was her phone, how she started keeping it close, never leaving it on the kitchen counter anymore. She used to let it buzz freely, rolling her eyes when telemarketers called, but then she began tilting the screen away from me, slipping it into her pocket when I walked into the room. I told myself it was nothing. Everyone deserves privacy, I thought. But deep down, the unease began to stir. Her schedule changed too. Nights that used to be spent together on the couch were replaced with late work meetings or catching up with friends. She would come home hours later than usual, her explanations wrapped in a smile that I wanted to believe. And I did believe because I wanted to, because to doubt her meant unraveling the very foundation of my life. There were dinners where she barely spoke, eyes fixed on some distant point beyond the table. I would ask how her day went, and she'd respond with a clipped fine before returning to her silence. I excused it as stress, as fatigue, as anything other than what it was. Trust can make a man blind. It can also make him desperate to justify what he doesn't understand. Friends noticed before I did. A quiet comment here, a raised eyebrow there. She seems distracted, one of them said. Another hinted more directly. Eric, are you sure everything's okay at home? I laughed it off, defended her, even grew irritated at their suggestions. To me, love meant loyalty, and loyalty meant refusing to believe anything else. But in the privacy of my thoughts, their words lingered. They gnawed at me in the late hours of the night when she was working late again, and I was left staring at the ceiling. Her appearance began to shift, too. She paid more attention to her clothes, her hair, her perfume. At first I admired it. I told her she looked beautiful. She smiled faintly, but her eyes didn't soften like they used to. That distant look haunted me, but I stayed silent. Silence was my nature. I didn't confront. I didn't accuse. I just observed. One night I offered to pick her up from work. It was meant to be a kind gesture, an excuse to spend time together. She declined immediately, her tone sharper than expected. Don't, she said, I'll manage. The rejection stung more than I wanted to admit. But again, I told myself stories. Maybe she was tired. Maybe she just wanted space. I convinced myself of these lies because the alternative was unbearable. Every sign was there. Every warning light flashing in front of me. Yet I dismissed them. I thought love meant trusting without question, even when the questions were burning in my chest. I thought patience and silence would protect me. Instead, they left me blind to what was unraveling. Still, even in those moments, I wasn't angry. Not yet. Anger wasn't in me then. Only confusion, quiet disappointment, and a growing ache that I didn't have the courage to voice. I told myself, wait, this will pass. I clung to the hope that the woman I married was still there, buried beneath whatever phase she was going through. But deep down, in the silence between our words, I felt it. Something was slipping away from me, something I couldn't name but could no longer ignore. And though I stayed calm on the surface, a quiet thought formed in the back of my mind. If she's lying to me, I will know. I will remember. The truth didn't arrive gently. It came crashing down like glass shattering across a marble floor, sudden, sharp, impossible to ignore. It was a Tuesday afternoon, a day like any other. I left work early, a rare decision, thinking it would be a small surprise for her. I imagined we could have dinner together, maybe even rekindle what had been slipping through my fingers. I remember carrying flowers in my hand, feeling almost foolish for being so sentimental but still hopeful. Hope, it was always my weakness. When I walked through the door, I knew instantly. You can sense betrayal before you see it. The silence was too heavy, the air too still, like the house itself was holding its breath. And then I saw her, sitting on the couch, laughing softly into her phone. A laugh I hadn't heard directed at me in months. She didn't notice me right away. She was too absorbed in whoever was on the other end, too comfortable, too careless. When her eyes met mine, the color drained from her face. She hung up quickly, words stumbling out about work, about a client, about anything but the truth. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just looked at her, and in that silence she broke. I could see it in her trembling hands, in the way her eyes darted away. The story she tried to build collapsed under the weight of my calm. That night the lies unraveled. One by one, piece by piece, she confessed. Not out of guilt, but because she was cornered. There had been someone else. For months. Late nights weren't work. The sudden care for her appearance wasn't for me. The distance I felt wasn't in my imagination. She had betrayed me in every way a person could betray another. I listened. That was all. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I didn't even ask why. I just let the words wash over me, each one stripping away the life I thought I had built. My silence unsettled her more than rage ever could. She wanted a reaction, something to push against, but I gave her nothing. Inside, though, I was crumbling. The days that followed were worse. Divorce papers came quickly, as if she had them prepared all along. Lawyers, mediations, cold negotiations that treated a decade of love as numbers on a page. She wanted the house, the savings, the accounts, and in the end she took nearly everything. I signed where I was told to sign, my pen scratching across paper while my chest felt hollow. Friends I thought were mine drifted toward her side. Mutual connections chose convenience over loyalty. I became the ghost at gatherings, the afterthought in conversations. She painted me as the distant, distracted husband, and I didn't defend myself. Maybe part of me didn't care anymore. Maybe part of me wanted to disappear. By the time it was over, I was left with almost nothing. A small apartment, a few pieces of furniture, and the clothes I carried in boxes. The man who once thought he had everything, love, stability, a future, was stripped bare in a matter of weeks. But the cruelest part wasn't the money. It wasn't even the house. It was the betrayal of trust, the deliberate dismantling of the life I thought we shared. I had believed in her with every fiber of my being, and she had taken that belief, twisted it, and used it against me. That day, something inside me broke, but not in the way she expected. She thought she had ended me, left me powerless, defeated. What she didn't realize was that in destroying everything, she had given me something she couldn't take back: resolve. I didn't fight her then. I didn't resist the losses. I let her walk away thinking she had won. But in my silence, a seed was planted, a seed that would grow into something far greater than she could ever imagine. She thought the collapse was my ending. She didn't know it was my beginning. After the divorce, the world grew quiet. Too quiet. The apartment I moved into was nothing like the home I had left behind. The walls were bare, the furniture second-hand, the air carrying the faint smell of dust and loneliness. At night, the silence pressed down on me, heavier than any weight I had ever carried. No laughter in the kitchen, no footsteps in the hallway, just the hum of the refrigerator and the echo of my own breathing. People said I should be angry, that I should fight back, that I should demand more, argue harder, refuse to let her strip me of everything. But anger never came, only stillness. I accepted the losses with the same calm I had accepted her lies. I didn't scream in court. I didn't make speeches to friends. I just signed the papers, walked out, and carried my boxes into a space that didn't yet feel like mine. There is something about silence that people misunderstand. They see it as weakness, as surrender. But silence is more dangerous than rage. Silence listens. Silence remembers. And in those quiet nights when I sat alone at a small kitchen table eating meals I barely tasted, I was remembering everything. I replayed the laughter I had once believed in, the subtle changes I had ignored, the confessions she made with trembling lips. Each memory hurt, but each one also sharpened me. Pain, when processed in silence, transforms. It turns into clarity, into precision. The world outside moved on quickly. She posted photos of her new life, smiles with friends, dinners at restaurants I once paid for, vacations with the man who had taken my place. Mutual acquaintances avoided me, afraid of choosing sides. And yet I wasn't bitter. I wasn't jealous. I was simply still, watching, waiting. I took long walks through the city, letting the noise of traffic drown out my thoughts. I wandered into bookstores, sat on benches, and observed people rushing through their lives. No one knew who I was. No one cared. And in that anonymity, I found something unexpected: freedom. For the first time in years, I had nothing to lose. No expectations, no obligations, no image to maintain. I was stripped bare, and though it felt like death at first, it was also the beginning of something new. I started writing in a notebook, fragments of thoughts, memories, lessons. I wasn't planning revenge yet. I wasn't even thinking about success. I was simply documenting the ruins of my life, page by page, as if trying to make sense of the wreckage. And in those pages, I began to see patterns, mistakes I had made, opportunities I had missed, strengths I had underestimated in myself. At night, I would sit by the window of that small apartment, staring out at the lights of the city. Somewhere out there, she was laughing, confident that she had broken me, but I didn't feel broken. Hollow, yes. Wounded, absolutely, but not broken. There is a moment in every storm when the wind finally dies down, when the rain stops and the world falls into eerie silence. That was where I was, standing in the ruins of what once was, untouched by rage, untouched by pity. Just still. People mistook my calm for defeat. They whispered that I was finished, that I had lost everything, that I would never recover. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I let them think whatever they wanted because in truth I wasn't trying to prove anything to anyone. Not yet. I was building something they couldn't see. In silence I was gathering strength. In stillness I was preparing. And one day they would understand. Silence isn't surrender. It's the pause before the strike. Silence gave me space, but planning gave me purpose. In those first few months after the divorce, I lived like a shadow. I went to work, came home, cooked simple meals, and sat alone in my apartment. But inside, something was shifting. Slowly, deliberately, I began to see the outlines of a different future. A future not built on love or trust, but on discipline, strategy, and control. I had spent my entire career helping others grow their wealth. I had advised clients on investments, guided them through risks, built portfolios that made fortunes for them, while I lived modestly. I realized then, I had been building empires for others while neglecting my own. That thought lit something inside me. I didn't want to chase her. I didn't want to prove her wrong in arguments or courtrooms. My revenge wouldn't be loud. It wouldn't be a confrontation. It would be the slow, methodical construction of a life so powerful, so unshakable, that she and everyone who doubted me would be forced to witness it. So I began again, brick by brick. Every night after work, I stayed up late studying markets, business models, leadership strategies. I devoured books on entrepreneurship, pored over case studies, and made notes of every opportunity others had overlooked. While she was out enjoying dinners and vacations, I was laying foundations. I cut back on everything unnecessary. No expensive clothes, no distractions. Every dollar I saved, I invested. Not recklessly, but with precision. Small moves at first, then bolder ones as my confidence grew. I took calculated risks, some of which failed, but each failure taught me more than any success could. During the day, I became more than just a financial consultant. I became a student of human behavior. I studied people, their patterns, their fears, their ambitions. I watched how money flowed, how influence worked, how power was quietly transferred in boardrooms. And I realized something important. Revenge didn't require violence or confrontation. It required patience. It required intelligence. I started forming connections too. Not friendships I was done trusting carelessly, but strategic alliances. Every handshake, every meeting, every phone call became a piece of a larger puzzle I was putting together. Piece by piece, the vision sharpened. A company of my own. A business not tied to anyone else's name, not dependent on her approval, not vulnerable to betrayal. Something that was mine, entirely mine. Of course, no one believed in me. Colleagues smiled politely, assuming I was just trying to distract myself from the ruins of my marriage. Friends who had sided with her barely returned my calls, but their silence didn't discourage me, it fueled me. Because I knew one truth they didn't. I had nothing left to lose. And a man with nothing to lose is far more dangerous than one with everything. In those nights of planning, I wasn't dreaming of wealth for its own sake. I wasn't picturing luxury or applause. I was picturing her face, the shock in her eyes the day she would realize what I had built. I imagined walking into rooms where my name carried weight, where people looked at me with respect she could no longer touch. That vision kept me moving even on the days when exhaustion threatened to pull me under. And so I built quietly. I built with patience, with strategy, with a cold kind of clarity I had never known before. I didn't announce my plans. I didn't seek sympathy. I stayed silent, still, focused. She thought she had ended me. What she didn't realize was that she had given me the greatest gift of all, freedom from illusion, and the hunger to rebuild from ashes. The blueprint of my revenge wasn't about destroying her. It was about creating a life so vast, so undeniable, that she would have no choice but to watch it rise. And soon, very soon, the first pieces would fall into place. It began quietly, almost invisibly. The kind of success that doesn't make headlines yet but shifts something in the air. The first contract I landed was small, a consulting deal with a mid-sized firm that most people wouldn't have noticed. But to me, it was the spark. The check wasn't large, but it proved something vital. I could build on my own. I could stand without leaning on anyone else's foundation. From there, the momentum grew. One client became two became five. Word spread, not about my personal life, but about my results. I delivered returns where others had failed. I advised with precision, with a calm confidence that drew people in. While others made noise, I made progress. Quiet, steady progress. My apartment, once a place of ruin, turned into a command center. Papers spread across the table, charts pinned to the walls, late-night calls made with investors who began to take me seriously. There were nights I didn't sleep, days I skipped meals, but I didn't complain. Every sacrifice was fuel, every small victory a step closer to something bigger. And then came the moment I'll never forget. The first time my name appeared in an industry journal. Just a short mention, a passing line about the consultant who was making waves. But when I read it, something shifted inside me. My name was no longer tied to failure, no longer whispered with pity. It was starting to carry weight. I didn't tell her. I didn't reach out. She had moved on, parading her new life for the world to see. Photos with him, vacations, dinners, new clothes bought with money I once earned. I didn't comment. I didn't even look for long. But I knew eventually she would see me. She would hear my name again. And when she did, it wouldn't be as the man she left behind, it would be as someone unrecognizable. My first strike wasn't a confrontation. It wasn't revenge in the traditional sense. It was success. Quiet, undeniable success. I let the numbers speak for me. Let the growth of my company echo louder than any words ever could. There was a conference, one she used to attend with me back when we played the part of the perfect couple. This time I went alone. I walked through the glass doors, my head high, no bitterness in my chest. People recognized me, approached me, shook my hand. They spoke of deals, of opportunities, of future collaborations. And in those moments I realized something. I was no longer surviving. I was rising, word traveled fast. Within months, I secured partnerships that doubled my company's value. Investors who once overlooked me now sought me out. Meetings that once ended in rejection now ended in signatures. And through it all, I stayed composed. No celebrations, no arrogance, just quiet, steady forward motion. But the true strike, the one that mattered, came not in the form of contracts or profits. It came the night I heard from a mutual acquaintance that she had seen my name on the news. A brief segment about the emerging entrepreneur reshaping financial consulting. She hadn't expected it. She hadn't believed I was capable, and when she saw it, I was told, her face changed. The confidence she carried, the certainty that she had destroyed me. It faltered. That was my first strike. Not words, not confrontation, just presence, just proof. She thought I would disappear quietly into the ruins she left behind, but instead I stepped out of them, carrying something far stronger than before. And this was only the beginning. Success changes things. Not just the numbers in your account or the headlines that carry your name. It changes the energy around you. Doors that were once locked begin to open. People who once dismissed you now lean in to listen. Invitations arrive not out of pity but out of respect. For me, the real turning point wasn't the money, though it was finally flowing in larger streams than I ever imagined. It wasn't even the partnerships I was forming with companies that once wouldn't return my calls. No, the true shift came the day I realized I wasn't just building wealth. I was building power. By the middle of that year, my company had grown beyond anything I'd pictured in those nights of silence and fury. We had an office, sleek, minimalist, full of young, hungry minds who believed in my vision. I could see in their eyes the same fire I carried. They didn't just work for me. They worked with me, each one pushing the machine forward. And then came the invitation. It was for a gala. A charity event hosted by one of the largest firms in the city. The kind of event where names aren't just mentioned, they're measured. She and her new partner would be there. I knew it the moment I saw the list. For a second, I considered declining. I didn't want to be pulled back into the weight of the past. But then I thought about the journey, the ruin, the silence, the climb. No, this wasn't about her. This was about me walking into a room I had once been pushed out of, and doing it on my own terms. The night of the gala, I stood in front of the mirror, fastening my cufflinks. The suit was tailored, sharp. My reflection no longer carried the look of a man broken by betrayal. My eyes were steady, my posture strong. I wasn't going there to flaunt. I was going there to exist and let my existence speak for itself. When I arrived, I felt the stares. Not the pitying stares I once endured, but the curious kind. People whispered, some approached. I shook hands, exchanged smiles, gave short, deliberate answers. I didn't chase attention. I let it come to me. And it did. Then across the room I saw her. She looked the same. beautiful, polished, dressed in a gown that turned heads. But her eyes betrayed something else when they landed on me. For the briefest moment, she froze. He was beside her, hand around her waist, confident in the way men often are when they believe they've won. But I could see it, the flicker of doubt in her gaze. The realization that the man she thought she had destroyed was standing taller than ever. We didn't speak that night. I didn't walk over, didn't force an encounter. I didn't need to. My presence was enough. Every conversation she overheard, every mention of my name from those around us, it was a strike sharper than any words I could have delivered. The gala wasn't about revenge, but it marked the shift. It was the night I understood the difference between survival and dominance. I was no longer clawing my way out of the ashes. I was building something vast, something untouchable, and she was there to witness it. On the drive home, I rolled the window down, letting the night air hit my face. For the first time in years, I felt not just relief, but clarity. The storm she brought into my life had nearly drowned me, but it had also remade me. That night, I realized something powerful. My revenge didn't need to be shouted. It only needed to be lived. And from that moment forward, every step I took was no longer about recovery. It was about legacy. There's a moment in every storm when the clouds finally break. When the rain doesn't just fall, it cleanses. For me, that moment came years after the divorce, when my company had grown into a force no one could ignore. We weren't just surviving in the market. We were dominating it. Competitors studied us. Journalists quoted me, and my name, Eric Hayes, carried weight. But true justice isn't about applause. It isn't about strangers recognizing your face. It's about the quiet shift in power, when those who betrayed you finally see what they created. Not the ruin, but the rebirth. The opportunity came unexpectedly. Her partner's firm, yes, the same man she left me for, was faltering. They had stretched too far, invested in projects they couldn't sustain. Rumors spread of layoffs, debt, and mismanagement. And then, like clockwork, my team identified an opening. We could acquire one of their failing subsidiaries at a price that would barely register on our balance sheets. I didn't hesitate. Some would call it business. To me, it was something else. A quiet strike delivered with precision. The papers reported it as a simple acquisition, but for her and for him, it meant watching my company swallow a piece of theirs. I didn't gloat. I didn't call her. I didn't need to. She knew. Justice, in my eyes, was never about humiliation. It was about balance. They had taken years of my life, stripped me of dignity, left me to crawl through ashes. And now, they were forced to watch as I rebuilt not just myself, but an empire larger than they could ever touch. I remember the first time we crossed paths after the acquisition. It was at a business conference. She walked in with him, their smiles carefully practiced. But the tension in their posture was clear. When she saw me, her expression faltered just slightly, like a shadow passing over her face. He extended his hand, forced and tight. I shook it with calm detachment. No words of bitterness, no need for them. My silence was sharper than any insult. Later, as I spoke on stage about resilience, strategy, and growth, I didn't once look at them. I didn't have to. Every word was a reflection of what I had become, and every round of applause was a reminder of what they had lost. Walking off the stage, I felt no rage, no burning desire for more vengeance, just peace. The circle had closed. That night, as I sat alone in my office overlooking the city, I thought back to the man I was, the one sitting in an empty apartment after the divorce, staring at unpaid bills, wondering how everything had collapsed so quickly. That man was gone. In his place stood someone forged by betrayal, tempered by silence, and strengthened by patience. And the truth was simple. I wasn't trying to prove her wrong anymore. I wasn't even trying to win. I had already won the day I chose not to be broken. The empire I built wasn't for her or for revenge. It was for me, for the man who stayed quiet when he could have shouted, for the man who endured the cracks, the collapse, and the stillness, for the man who chose to plan, to execute, and to rise. Final justice isn't delivered with fire or fury. It arrives in silence, in power, in the undeniable fact that you survived and thrived. And as the city lights flickered beneath me, I whispered to myself the truth I had carried all along. I wasn't trying to win. I was ending it.